Today we've got a great revenge story of leaving somebody utterly stranded. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, revenge on an animal abuser. One day I was on my evening walk with my dog and we came across a small dog standing in the middle of the street shaking. Its hair was matted, had mange ridden with fleas, one eye swollen and sealed shut with mucus, nails so long it was walking on the back of its paws, malnourished and quivering. I was shocked. I called my wife to bring me a blanket and come pick us up. While I was waiting, the door of the house in front of us opened, and out came a disheveled-looking older man. He started calling for the dog to come inside. I absolutely lost it. I screamed at him asking if it was his dog and he replied it was. I asked him why it was in such bad shape and he said, "She's sick and won't eat." I yelled at him that there was no freaking way in the world I was letting him take her back inside. The shouting match lasted long enough for a few neighbors to come outside, who later told me he had another dog in the house. Eventually my wife pulls up and I wrap the doggo in the blanket and go home. I look up the name of our local no-kill shelter, but they were closed until the following day. My wife and I decided to call her Sally. I gave Sally a bath and went and bought some wet food since she wouldn't need dry kibble. She devoured it. I set her up a nice sleeping area in the garage for her to spend the night. First thing in the morning, I took Sally to the shelter and called animal control and told them what happened. They went to check her out, took a statement from me, and ended up at his house confiscating his other dog. Unfortunately, Sally was put down due to the horrible shape it was in. She was also very old. Here's where the revenge begins. The old jerk's house was on the route I took to walk my dog twice a day. My dogs liked to take a dump about 2 houses before we reached his. Perfect! Now I didn't need to carry bags of crap all the way back to my house. I started tossing them on his roof twice a day. At first, he would climb a ladder around once a week to get them down, but eventually I broke his will to do that. This went on for about a year before I moved. His house was covered in crap bags. I also printed out flyers with his address and pictures of how I found Sally and put them in all the neighbors' mailboxes. Throwing bags of dog poo onto his roof is good revenge and all, but can we have some real justice for Sally? Did this old guy not at least get a fine or something? I think it's crazy that somebody can mistreat an animal so blatantly and so horribly, get confronted by officials, and then kinda just turn around and walk around the next day like nothing ever happened. I'm not saying this guy has to go to jail or something, but shouldn't there be some kind of hang-up about this? Broccoli commented, "Okay, I'm all for shaming animal abusers, but maybe this guy was senile? Maybe he needs to be put in protective care?" That said, our next story is My Noisy Neighbors. 4 years ago, I had a house built in a new development less than half an hour outside of my hometown. At first, it was a dream come true. I was excited to be a new homeowner, but shortly after moving in, I started to become aware of my next door neighbors. They would be constantly throwing parties well into the AM hours, their lawn would be covered in trash the next day, and it would blow all around the neighborhood. At first, I thought maybe they're just throwing some housewarming get-togethers to get settled in, so I gave them some slack and let it slide. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning. 3 to 4 days out of the week, there would be excessive noise late into the night coming from that house. By this time, I've been calling the cops so much, when they pick up, they just say they're on their way. I've submitted countless HOA complaints, and yet this still keeps happening. On one specific occasion, they were throwing a children's birthday party and they were using a PA system in their backyard. Now, I don't live out in the country. In fact, we're in the city limits and the houses are quite close to each other. Not to mention the backyards aren't even that big. Why on earth would these people need a PA system of all things? Well, the noise was absolutely unbearable, and this time it was the entire street that called in noise complaints. When the cops arrived and were talking to the owners of the noise house, they straight up told the cop, "I don't care." After this incident, I filed one more HOA complaint threatening to take legal action against their company unless they did something about this, and as if I said the magic words, they got fined, and there hasn't been a party there since. Now, on to the petty revenge. The guy next door is a construction worker and has a brutal weekday schedule. Weekends are his time to relax. For the past 4 years, every Saturday I've been mowing my lawn at 6 AM starting on his side. Sometimes I just sit there and chill on my phone for about 10 minutes while the mower's running right outside his bedroom window. Saturday mornings are my favorite time of the week. I'm sure OP has one of those horrendous old mowers that hasn't had an oil change in 10 years either, so when you pull on the string 5 times to get that lawnmower finally started, I'm sure it sounds like a nuclear rocket taking off. Growing up, I lived in a pretty hot climate and my parents always made me mow the lawn, and I was always so paranoid about when to do it, because if you don't do it in the morning hours, it's almost impossible to drag yourself out there for more than like 5 to 10 minutes. The last thing I wanted to do was start mowing right at 7 a.m. and make any possible neighbors upset, but like that was kind of the best time to do it. Practical Rule 8255 commented, "We used to have this problem years ago. We had one neighbor a block away that would blast music into the early morning hours. Then one year it just stopped. Apparently someone broke into their garage and stole their sound system. I despise thievery, but man did the perps help the neighborhood." Naked Nomad commented, "Reminds me of the guy with the new vet in the apartment complex. Car alarm was going off all the time. One morning he came out and the vet was gone, but they left the alarm in the parking spot." Our next story is, "Make me wait? Turnabout is fair play." This morning began the same way any Sunday morning begins when I work. I woke up at 7:20 a.m., I showered till 7:28 a.m., I prepared for my day until 7:40 a.m., I went to the gas station to get some breakfast, arriving at 7:45 a.m. Sometimes there's a bit of a line, but it's no big deal, all was going well. Then I get to the line with 2 kids in front of me. The cashier gets all their things rung up in about 15 seconds or so. Then, in the process of attempting to think about paying, they answer a phone call, dig through their wallets, put the card in the machine, take the card out of the machine, put the card back in the machine, take the card back out of the machine, put it in the machine, realize it's been working the whole time, slowly punch in their debit pin 1 number per minute. In the time I waited behind them, planets, stars, perhaps even galaxies winked out of existence, never to be seen again. Finally, after 17 eternities, it was my turn, the grand total of which took about 45 seconds. What did I do next? Raced out to my car, noticed the 2 kids in front of me just preparing to back out, got into my car, backed out right in front of them. Normally, I'm in a bit of a hurry, but I decided to make a freaking career out of this back out. Surely, if anyone decides to watch the convenience store security cameras, they will view what can only be described as a masterful performance art. Sadly, there wasn't an audience, but if there have been, Albert Einstein himself surely would have wept. The 2 kids, chatty as can be, suddenly stopped their talking and just stared, mouths agape, in ever-increasing annoyance as planets, stars, and perhaps even galaxies winked out of existence in the universe above them. After finally extricating myself from my parking spot, I decided to take a leisurely retirement pace to the road before zooming off to head to my job, arriving just as the clock turned 8 a.m. Was it petty? Freaking yes it was. Was it worth my time? Obviously not. Would I do it again? Ever and always, until the last stars wink out of a dying universe. See, I love revenge stories like this, but if I were in that position, I don't know if I would be able to overcome my apathy to get to the point where I'm backing out so slow, the universe gets to entropy. Dual Preference 6645 commented, "Brings back a great memory of the movie Fried Green Tomatoes, where Kathy Bates' character has a similar run-in. She doesn't get her revenge until the second type of situation happens where someone steals her parking spot. She proceeds to continue ramming into their car with them screaming about the altercation, and she looks at them, says, 'I have better insurance.' Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast." That said, our next story is Noisy Neighbors and Dog Poop. This was about 5 years ago. My husband and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with our young son. He was almost 1 year old. It was a 3-level apartment building and we were the 2nd floor. We had young neighbors above us and it was only 2 people, and they were okay for about a month. Then they started being super noisy, stomping, banging, playing music incredibly loud where you could feel the bass through the ceiling. If you've had a young child, you can imagine how well this went. We got a sound machine to help drown out the noise, and it still woke him up and kept us up. We called the management office about this and they said to try talking to them. I tried talking to them and was told to freak myself and my infant. Then they proceeded to jump down each step so they could be as loud as possible. After talking to them, I tried talking to management again, and we were noticing now that it was like 5 people living in the apartment. Management was no help and told us to call the non-emergency police number. We called multiple times and they would come over and they talked to them a few times, and finally one officer, who also had an infant, said to fight fire with fire as long as we didn't do anything illegal. When they would make noise, we would make noise. I would bang the broomstick into the ceiling wherever we heard the banging. We would play loud music outside their door. This went on for a month, and my husband was tired of them still acting like that. He had a plan for petty revenge on these noisy, loud neighbors. He scoped out which car was theirs. It was the loudest car there. He took out our dog for his nightly potty break and came back laughing and had put dog poop under their door handles of the car. He did this 2 or 3 times. 2 weeks later, they were moving out, and we finally had a peaceful night's sleep. So they're extremely annoying. They finally get revenge taken upon them in the form of them finding out dog poop is being put under their door handles, and they immediately just pivot and move straight to, we're moving out. They don't just, try to be better neighbors? Sponge67 commented, a friend of mine had downstairs neighbors who would get drunk and fight all night long. Well, he tried talking to them, but you can guess the response he got. He decided to pay them back. The next time they were going at it, he dropped a mic down from his balcony and taped them. The next morning at 7 a.m., he lowered a Bluetooth speaker just outside their bedroom window and played it very loud. It took a couple of times before they finally shut up. Our next story is Deer Camp. Setting, Deer Camp. Dude joins a neighboring hunting club. Rule is they can't put a stand within 300 yards of another club member's stand. So dude builds a stand right on the edge of their club's lease, blocking a trail that takes us from one side of our lease to the other, and 50 yards from one of our stands. Technically, there's nothing we can do. He's on his club's property by 10 feet and not near any of his other club's stands. We didn't want to start a war, so we moved our stand away from there. Guess we now have a place to dump our gut piles, dead varmints, and, well, last night's dinner. Last seen, his feeder was destroyed by the hogs, and driving past his stand was an excruciating exercise in vomit control, thanks to some decaying varmints. As somebody who wants nothing to do with any kind of hunting or deer stands or anything like that, there was actually very little I can say I understood about the intricacies of this story. That said, it's just another classic person of, got mine, good luck on yours. Dakalux commented, dang, that's effective. The only thing I wondered is if he was actually being an inconsiderate jerk, or simply not paying attention to other people's needs because he's incompetent. Did you talk to him about this? Our next story is Long Distance Freakery. This just happened recently. A woman in a southern state got my login information for a big box store from some data breach and tried to go on a shopping spree. I was able to catch it within 10 minutes of the first order being placed because I'm an avid email checker, canceled it, and removed all payment methods from that account while also updating login methods, etc. After filing the police report and knowing the time frame for something like this to be taken care of, I pondered for a moment what I could do with the full name and address of this woman. So I made some assumptions regarding her political leanings in a southern state and signed her up to receive physical mailers from the DNC, multiple pro-choice organizations, and LGBTQ+ organizations. ETA, for those concerned, I just hounded an unbeknownst victim. I confirmed with the sheriff when I filed the report. She has a history of violations and was dumb enough to use her full name and real address. So honestly, the thing I'm surprised the most about is the fact that they were able to get OP's login information from some data breach, and they were the first ones? Somebody dumb enough to put in their full name and address? I just feel like if it ended up in a data breach like that, somebody that's dumb enough to use their full name and address like that and just throw it in there would be getting to it well after that account had already been tossed and turned and flipped right over on its head. Century Eggs and Rice commented, sign her up with Scientology and the Mormons. Scorched earth. ETA, due to popular demand, add Jehovah's Witnesses and car dealers. Head Razzmatazz7174 commented, Scientology is ruthless. Even if you move, if you put in a forwarding address, they will find you within 6 months and start sending you their junk again. My boyfriend signed up years ago to get their magazine as he thought it had something to do with new science stuff. Found out to his horror it was a cult church. It was years before he figured out that every time he put in a forwarding address, even if he waited until the very last month you could do it, it would start up again. This time when he moved, he didn't put in an official forwarding address, he just updated his address on the websites of the companies he used all the time. It's been 2 years and counting, no mail. We are hoping that did the trick. Our next story is how I got back at my two-faced coworker. So I work in an office where one of my coworkers, Kelly, always acted like the perfect employee around our manager, but the second his back was turned, she would slack off, dump work on others, and be generally unpleasant. She would go out of her way to make things harder for the rest of us, but of course, when our manager was around, she would suddenly be the epitome of efficiency, perfection, and helpfulness. This two-faced behavior started affecting my work because she would pawn off last-minute tasks on me, which made me look bad for not finishing on time. Meanwhile, Kelly would always get praise for being on top of things. It drove me nuts. I tried calling her out a couple of times, but she always had some typical excuse or pretended like she misunderstood the situation, so I decided that if I couldn't directly call her out, I'd have to do something to make her stumble. You see, Kelly has this thing about making sure she's seen as the most organized person in the office. She lives for it. Her desk is always spotless and she's got color-coded folders for everything. So one day when she was out on a lunch break, I accidentally messed up her precious folder system. I didn't do anything crazy, just swapped a few labels and refiled a couple of documents in the wrong folders. Nothing too obvious at first glance, but enough to throw her off. Cue the next team meeting, where our manager was going over some projects and Kelly couldn't find the right documents when he asked for them. She was visibly flustered and I made sure to offer a helpful, "Maybe you misfiled them?" She looked like she was going to explode. The best part? Our manager looked annoyed at her for the first time, and I could tell it ate her alive. She spent the rest of the week going through her entire filing system trying to figure out what went wrong, all while I sat back doing my actual work without her dumping any more of it on me. Petty? Yep. Worth it? Absolutely. I think it's fair game sometimes to try to knock somebody off of a high horse when they're clearly misplaced on their high horse. KombuchaBot commented, "Genius, but don't do it again or you'll get caught." Just straight out refused to take on any of her tasks. Our next story is, she tried to plagiarize my work, I went nuclear. During my freshman year at university, I'd been working on a group project with 4 other people. We had completed an experiment as part of a physics module and each needed to write a report, approximately 2,500 words, to be assessed. As the deadline for this module fell slap bang in the middle of a really active few weeks, I took the uncharacteristically organized decision to write and submit my report a few weeks early. Job done. Free to party over varsity week. One of my colleagues left everything until last minute and called me in a panic 2 days before the due date and asked if I could share my report with her so that she could understand how to structure the report and present the data. Me being a bit dopey and probably still a bit intoxicated from a week of partying, sent her my report in its entirety. The following day, night before submission, she called again and asked if I could proofread her report and make any minor adjustments I saw fit before she submitted. I agreed and she emailed the document over. Much to my horror, she had basically copied and pasted my entire report. I couldn't believe that she was moronic enough to send me the report to look at, given that she had plagiarized the whole thing. This was where I became quite vengeful and petty. I first used the find and replace function on Word and replaced commonly used words from our experiments with vulgarities. I then replaced a step-by-step methodology from our experiment with a step-by-step recipe for spaghetti bolognese. The data table was replaced with the box scores from the NFL games that weekend. I took the time to change the authors' names and her references to characters from Harry Potter, i.e. Weasley et al. 2009, Dumbledore and Grindelwald 2008. To top things off, I rewrote her conclusion as a confession that she had attempted to plagiarize the report. I sent the revised document to her and fully expected to receive an angry phone call in response. I did receive an angry phone call 3 weeks later when she was called in for a faculty meeting due to academic misconduct. Apparently, being the dingbat she was, she had not even proofread the document I had sent her and had submitted it. She hadn't just failed the module, but she was under threat of expulsion, as though trying to blame me for the content of the document she had inadvertently admitted to attempting plagiarism. Upon returning to the faculty 5 years later as a research fellow, I discovered that the director of teaching had kept a copy of the report and routinely showed it to students as a warning not to plagiarize. OP was enough of a homie to send you the full report they did so that you could change it enough so that you could say it wasn't plagiarized. And yet you were enough of a jerk to send it back to them and say, hey, can you just proofread that? Maybe make sure it isn't as plagiarized as I literally did. OneLab6077 echoed this, commenting, I got the impression she emailed you the report back just to ask you to edit the report on her behalf since she was too lazy to change the report to make sure it's not plagiarized. She was too lazy to check the report you sent back to her anyway. This next story is, I made my boss and coworkers possibly eat spoiled food. So I'm working in an office for many years now, and because I'm the only one who cleans and takes care of the place, I finally had enough of no one else helping. I'm washing the office cups and cutlery every day, including the other people's. I'm throwing away the garbage, I'm vacuuming and mopping and doing the bathrooms, and finally I'm picking up after everyone like I'm their mother. I don't feel appreciated. No one has offered to help, of course, and I can't stop cleaning because the office will reek, so here comes my small petty revenge. People have been leaving their snacks open in the kitchen for many days in a row. So right now, we have 10 different snacks open. I used to take rubber bands and properly close them up, the snacks, or put them in containers I found in order to preserve them so that they keep fresh longer. So I stopped doing that. You know what? I don't really want to eat any of those snacks, so I'll just let them be open for weeks now in the open air in our really hot Mediterranean county we live. And so, these snacks have been open for at least a month now, and they continue eating them without checking them, and they are not bothered at all. But I know from past experience, these particular snacks can grow small, tiny maggots. Oh no. I just gotta say, unless it's in your job description or you're getting paid extra to do it, it's not worth it because people will begin assuming that is your job or that is something that you want to do. Not even necessarily something that they need to give you props for or make you feel better about, just assuming that's the norm. Like No Parfait 1823 commented, if it's not in your job description and you're not getting paid to clean up, stop. They might need a wake-up call that they are adults and need to clean up after themselves. ZachStad295 commented, my wife used to clean the break room at her work, got peed off one day as the place was a total disaster. After a week, her boss called her into his office and asked why she didn't clean the break room anymore. She told him that it wasn't her job. He just thought it was her job and never bothered to check until she stopped doing it. Worst part was whenever she was on holiday, there was a rota to keep the room clean, which stopped when she returned. Our next story is, pretty sure I gave a thief stealing items from my pickup bed a valid reason never to come back. Over the last few weeks, I noticed some things missing from my truck bed, so I went and spoke to a few neighbors, and one told me he's seen someone lingering around across from my street corner late at night several days in a row, but didn't seem to care too much about it. He didn't take anything super valuable, just things like my old tarp and some things like some piping, bungee cords, and my straps for securing loads, so it was mostly more of an annoyance than a true loss. So I remembered those popular videos of people putting glitter traps or fart spray to get back at package thieves, and decided I'd step it up a notch in the most disgusting way possible. I looked around for some locked containers I barely use and didn't mind getting rid of, and found an old toolbox with a partially busted latch, and a cheap lockbox that I'd used at garage sales. So I started by taping a note with large words into the lids of both of them that read, "Since you seem to enjoy stealing my crap, I hope this was worth your time." The next time I had to take a crap, instead of using the toilet, I decided to actually drop a few turds in both containers, and then I locked the cash box but stuck a measly zip tie on the toolbox and threw some nails and large screws in one of the drawers so it would sound like there were still tools in it. The next morning, both items were gone, and the dude hadn't been seen for over a week. and I can only assume it's because he literally stole 2 boxes of human crap, thinking that he actually scored something valuable, only for it to turn out way worse than what he took previously. I've decided to stop being lazy though and actually transfer everything from my truck to my house now, and also I'm gonna be investing in a home surveillance system, but overall I found it pretty amusing and managed to fit a poop pun into it as well, although I'm glad he didn't take anything of real value. Sure, he got a cheap lockbox and a toolbox that was worth very little because of its condition, but whatever. The dude wanted crap, so I gave him some goddamn crap. I mean, it's a good revenge, but I think I would just kind of take this as an L and a learning lesson to be more cautious about my stuff. That said, I think just about anybody should invest in a home surveillance system. Deanna6812 commented, "My grandma got sick of people stealing gas cans out of the shed at her cottage. Filled a can with half gas, half sugar water. That one got stolen, and that was the last break-in she had. She found out later that someone on the lake had issues with their chainsaw, boat motor, and four-wheeler. Weird." Our next story is UPS driver versus impatient butthhat. I delivered to a hospital that has 2 loading docks for delivery vehicles. On this day, I pulled up at an unfortunate time and both docks were being used and I had about 30 packages to deliver, so I decided to be patient and wait for one to open so I could use it. Well, I've been waiting for about 5 to 10 minutes when I noticed one of the other delivery drivers were getting ready to leave. So I put my vehicle in reverse to get ready to take that dock when he pulled out and this jerk sees me about to reverse in and decides to swoop in and take the dock before I could get in the dock. He is in his personal car, by the way, not a delivery vehicle, a freaking Prius. When he gets out, I yell, "What are you doing? You saw me waiting for that dock." He pretended to not hear me and walked in the hospital. So, now I decide to freak this dude. I'll block his car in and unload my packages. He comes back a few minutes later when I'm still unloading and I call him a jerk. He shrugs his shoulders and gets in his car. Now I'm really ticked. So when I get done unloading that delivery, I decide I'm going to take my hour-long lunch break right here, blocking him and his car in. About 10 minutes into my break, he knocks on my window asking what I'm doing because he has to go, and I tell him I'm on my break, and we'll be on break for another 50 minutes. He then asks me to move, to which I say no and start laughing. He then begs, saying he's sorry and he has a job to get to, so I laugh again and said, "You're gonna be late, bud." Then I shut the window and finished my meal in the back of my truck in peace till my break was over. Some of the hospital staff saw this all happen and had a good time watching this guy just sitting in his Prius stewing over being blocked in. They apparently know this guy and said he's annoying and has been told not to park at the dock before. And just to be clear, my blocking him in at this dock did not impede any other deliveries for the hospital. If another delivery truck needed the dock, I would have moved, but luckily no other delivery vehicles came. I've seen this man a few other times after this incident, and he doesn't ever park at the docks anymore. Absolutely deserved, not just for getting in the way of the delivery driver, but for choosing to do that kind of stuff at a hospital delivery dock. Nitsanity commented, "This is the petty content I'm here for, small but big, simple but complicated. I have a tiny one from last week. Going into a store with heavy doors, important later, I sensed someone behind me. I held the door open for a lady who barged through and managed to both bump me and Tut at the same time. This annoyed me, so I called after her, 'You're welcome.' This caused her to spin around and have a go at me. I ignored her and went about my business. Shortly afterwards, I was heading out and saw her also heading to the exit. Her arms were full. I lengthened my stride and made it to the door first, slid through, and let it close. Heard her squawk of indignation behind me and responded with a single finger salute. Petty." Our next story is invite people behind my back, then get stranded. This is a story about my Aunt Kay and her trying to get me to drive and pay for her friends without telling me first. This happened around 2018. A relative had died and my mom and I were going to their wake. We were in the Philippines, so the wake is 2 to 3 weeks. My mom goes first to help set up the wake, and I would go in our car to pick up an elderly relative, Nana. Nana and the dead relative were sisters, but since she has mobility issues, traveling is a no-go. My vehicle is a big help for her. Pick her up and then we'll take the boat. Schedule is I pick up other relatives, then Aunt Kay, then Nana. The other relatives aren't important here as they were mostly spectators to what happened. I've been driving for about 5 hours and set to pick up Kay. She tells me the location and I waited there for about an hour. We were good on time, but I hated being made to wait. She arrives along with 8 other women, each lugging a backpack and a suitcase. My car can seat 8 people including the driver, and then luggage in the back. Before Kay, there was me, 3 relatives, and their luggage. I've made sure there's more than enough room for Nana, as she requires a wheelchair and one person accompanying her. I ask Kay what she was doing, and she tells me they're ready. I just stare at her, contemplating whether the violence would be physical or verbal. She tells me that she told her gal friends that she's going on a trip, and then asked them if they wanted to go. They all said yes. I don't know what else she told them, but apparently I'd be the one paying for their fare and other accommodations as they kept cooing at me for being so generous. I wasn't happy with her, mainly because she's treating this as a fun vacation when it isn't. The passengers in the car aren't happy with her, but they know to keep their mouth shut. Not because they don't want to get involved, but because Kay becomes a screaming banshee when she's told she's wrong. I told her off for expecting me to fund her gal vacation and for disrespecting the nature of our trip. There were so many things I wanted to do and say, but I wanted to get away before I do anything else I'd regret later. Then, petty revenge. So I calmly gave her enough money for the taxi and boat fare, then sped off. I had no problem paying for everything on the trip, but I wasn't as crap going to do that to people I don't know. I'm not a pushover. She did try to run after me, but she only got a few steps before giving up. Now, you're wondering why I'd give her money? It's because I know she'll give a sob story to everyone in the family chat. If I'm asked what I did, I'd tell them that I did give her money for the trip. Then she would be told, "Mustard gave you money, didn't he? Then what's the problem?" I picked Nana up, and when she asked where Kay was, I told her the entire event. All Nana said was that she never liked a drunk bench. When I arrived at the wake, my mom asked me what happened, and after explaining myself, she just went to playing cards. Kay arrived a week later. She had to beg Mom for money as she gave her friends what I gave her as an apology. Turns out she didn't bring any other cash with her. She had to pay for her gal's pal's trip back home and then gave them some cash as an apology. She actually waited for me for about an hour thinking I would turn back. When her sobbing and whining in the family chat got her nothing but a verbal RKO, she sent a long video of herself crying on the sidewalk. Entire wake and funeral and days after, she was giving me the stink eye and benching about me to everyone she could. Mostly everyone ignored her, so she would go and get drunk. Nana enjoyed herself, cried a lot. She's still alive despite nearing 90, and aside from her mobility problems, she's in good health. To this day, Kay doesn't ever want to tell me what made her think inviting 8 people without informing me was a good idea. Edit, Nana isn't my grandmother, more of a grand aunt. Nana dislikes Kay because Kay used to be such a heavy drinker she'd black out. This happened during a family reunion. Kay was so drunk and out of it that she started a fight with another relative. Nana got roped in as she was trying to calm Kay down. Kay instead attacked Nana. Kay was held down by other relatives and to this day refused to acknowledge what she did. Kay doesn't drink as much now as back then apparently, but it's still being brought up by others. You know, when OP described Kay inviting their pals along to come along on the trip, I was picturing maybe 2, maybe 3 friends. At the very end where OP said, I don't know what came over them and thinking that inviting 8 people would ever be okay. In my mind, I'm like, 8 people? How did they even think they were gonna fit in the car? Like, surely they knew at least Nana was also going to be in the car too, right? Like, did they really think they could comfortably fit 10 people? Even before including all the other family members that were going to be there? Drowsy Lou commented, "Nice one, blocking her from your car and from complaining about you after. She's definitely put in her place." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.